crafter. Today I'm going to be showing you how to do a paint pour, but on the cheap, on a budget. I've looked into paint pouring before and they're like, you gotta buy this special brand paint and you've gotta buy this special thinner. And by the time you add it all up, to make one of these things, it's like 20 bucks. So I did some research and I found out that there's a little secret to be able to do this for really cheap. The materials I'm using is this wonderful fake kind of little canvas thing from the dollar store. This was on sale after Valentine's Day for 35 cents. So I was like, hey, a 35-cent canvas, I will pick that up. Who cares if it says Heartbreaker? So you need a canvas. Second of all, you need paint. So I'm going to show you how to do this with these cheap apple barrel acrylic paints. You can get a 2-ounce bottle for 50 cents at Walmart. Kind of hard to beat that. And I've got several different colors here. And then the secret is going to be adding some water and soap to our paint to thin it out. Because if we were to try pouring it straight up like it is, it would be too thick and our colors would mostly just blend versus run and create the cool swirly designs. As far as soap, I'm just using like hand soap. I haven't tried this with many different kinds of soap, but let's be real, right now soap is hard to find. So this is just whatever hand soap we were able to pick up at the store. So that's what you need for this project. But the other thing you need to do is you need to prep your work surface. Since we're going to pour paint on here and then hold it up and let it drip off, we need something to catch the drip. So what I am doing, with my mom's permission, is I'm using one of her cookie sheets because it has a little bit of depth here. And then I have a trash bag. And I am putting the cookie sheet into the trash bag. In this way, I now have a little catch plate to catch any paint drips and to let it dry on, but I don't have to worry about it getting the pan dirty. And when we're done, we can just pull the bag off inside out and we're good to go. Other things you'll want are some little cups to mix your paint in, and you will want to keep paper towels on hand so that way you can clean up any messes you make. And another thing you can do is wear gloves. I'm not, because let's be real, gloves are also super hard to find right now. And the good news with acrylic paint is it cleans off of most surfaces really well. Like if it gets on my hands, I just let it dry and then just scrub it off and it comes off fine. Same if I get it on my table, it cleans off really well. That's not to say you should get it on your clothes or pour it on the carpet, but just to say that if you do get it on your hands, it's not a big deal, very easy to clean up. So now that our area is prepped, the first thing we need to do is mix our paints. Since mine has this like weird writing on it, I'm going to do a coat of black paint on here first, and then I'll pour my colors on top of that, so that way we don't see Heartbreaker randomly showing through. But all my paints I'm going to mix the same way. So first let's talk about our water. We need to add to our water some soap. This is probably like 4 to 6 ounces of water in these great Disney Burger King collector's cup. If you have these cups, let me know, because I know a lot of people who have these and people thought that these were like the greatest collector's item. But we're just going to add some soap to our water. I'm adding 3 pumps. I'm gonna use a little paintbrush that came with the dollar store canvas and mix this all together. And the purpose of the soap is to decrease the surface tension of our paint, just to make everything run really well. All right, so that is good. Now we're going to squeeze our paint into these little cups. So I'm first going to mix up some black paint to cover the background so it doesn't say Heartbreaker. So I'm gonna squeeze a little bit of paint into one of my cups. Oh, that's a nice paint booger. Once we've got our paint in here, we're going to add a little bit of our soap water. You want to do about a 2-to-1 ratio of paint to water, because if you thin it out too much, it doesn't work well. And I'm not doing a big canvas, so that's why I'm doing such small amounts. It's a little hard to tell, but this is fairly runny. I'm gonna add just a little bit more paint to make it just a little thicker. It's hard to see with the black. I'll show you a better shot with some of the other colors. But now it's definitely thinned out, but it's still got a bit of thickness to it. Kind of like when you're doing cook and serve pudding, like on the stove, right before it thickens up. You know how it's runny, but it's kind of got a little bit of a gooiness to it? That's kind of the consistency you want. So not full on pudding, but just before the pudding settles. So I'm gonna go ahead and pour this onto my canvas, and I may need to make more if it's not enough. One other thing you can do is if you want your canvas to be up out of whatever pours onto here, you can just use little cups to set it on after you pour, in between pours, or even while you pour. I'm gonna pour this onto my canvas. And if you're doing just a base coat, you can at this point totally get a paintbrush out and use it to coat over everything. I'm just weirdly using the back of a paintbrush. So you can see it's a little thick there, and that's partly because my paint is a little gunky, and also I could have made it a little thinner and that would run a little better. I'm not too worried because that's just the background coat. And also you might not want to set your canvas directly against it because it can bow your canvas out. This is just a dollar store canvas, so I'm not too worried about that. But now it's time for the fun part, to mix up the colors that are going to be on our finished canvas. I want to do this like pink and green and orange, and I think I'll throw in some yellow just for a little bit of contrast. So again, I'm going to squeeze some paint into my cup. And you don't need a ton, it just depends on how big your canvas is. Now to add a little bit of water, again, roughly like a 2-to-1. You just want to make sure it's runny enough that it will run, you know, but not so runny that it doesn't actually stay. You don't want to just totally spill right off like water would. So this is fairly liquid. That's probably pretty good consistency for spreading. Just make sure you mix your colors really well. And now it's time for the fun to begin. And I may need to mix up more of my colors, but we'll see. And of course you can pour it however you want. You can stack them up and pour whatever you want to do. I'm just gonna pour them in a nice spiral kind of design on here. Okay, so a couple quick notes on the paint pouring. If you want to look up like different ways to paint pour, there's tons of ideas out on YouTube, or if you just do a Google search. But another thing I'll mention here, like you might notice it with this orange one in particular, with this method you have the potential of the paint and the soap water separating. So if you saw the orange at first, it just kind of poured and run and mixed in really fast at the beginning, whereas at the end it was a lot more solid. That's because that first bit that came out, it wasn't mixed well, and that was mostly just water with a little bit of paint tint. So if it's too watery, it will run so much that it mixes in, but if you make sure that it's thick enough and mixed really well, you'll get a nice consistent coating versus just a watery, quick blending in pour. But really my method with the paint pour is I'm just gonna do it however I want and have fun with it, because that's really the idea with the paint pour, is just have fun with it. It doesn't have to turn out perfect, and you can always pour right over your paint pour if you don't like the way it turns out the first time. You can do as many pours as it takes to get it to look the way you want. But just remember that it's okay if it doesn't turn out exactly the way you're imagining, and make sure that you have fun with this. I'm also going back and adding in some of my excess paint just to get some more pops of color. This is one of those fun projects where there's different methods and techniques that turn out different ways, but there's not really a right or wrong way to do this, and it's kind of hard to mess up. But like I said, you can pour however you want. And then once you get the look you want, just let it dry. Also, another thing you can do while your paint is still wet is get an old toothbrush and put some rubbing alcohol on it, and then flick the toothbrush and just flick the rubbing alcohol onto your painting, and it will create those really cool little like water spots. I don't quite know what you call them. They look like that, what you see in the video. Just add some more dimension and texture to your paint pour. All right, so here we are 2 days later, and now it is dry. I think it was probably dry this morning. I do find that the cheap acrylic paints usually dry pretty fast, which is nice. So let's take a look at it. Gotta pop it off of here. We'll look at this in a second, but here's why this is so easy. See, there's still a little bit of moisture, but I can just slide my pan out, and inside out the bag, and boom, cleaned up. Pan's good as new. But here's a look at my finished paint pour. So there you have it. This is an easy way to do a paint pour for really cheap. And I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. Well, actually a couple things. First of all, I do wish I hadn't mixed mine quite as much because I like it when the colors are really vivid. And the more mixing you do, the more they get blended together. But the little secret about paint pours is basically that if you decide you don't like how your paint pour turned out, you can just pour right on top of this and make a new paint pour. So, you know, it might take you a couple tries and you may end up doing a few coats of paint pours before you get something that you really like. But seriously, if your paint pour doesn't turn out as good as you were hoping, you can always just do another pour right on top of that. Also, bonus idea, if you want to make it look glossy, you could always coat your paint pour with some kind of seal like an epoxy or a resin, and they make different things to seal in paint projects, but you could also do that if you want to have that glossy shine to your painting. But I hope y'all enjoyed this video. Make sure to come back next week for another Tutorial Tuesday, and until I see you next time, happy crafting!